Hi everyone, happy Friday. I'm Izzy, I'm the co-founder here at Kind Community, and this is the Kind Community Show, where we share stories of founders, activists, and influencers promoting positivity and protection of our planet, discussing how collaboration can help make the sustainable attainable. On today's episode, we have Jojo Sureh, founder of Cook to Care charity. Cook to Care is a fast-growing community of volunteers founded in March 2020. While initially intended to support vulnerable neighbours throughout the first COVID-19 lockdown, it has since grown into a team of over 150 volunteer cooks and carriers. Hungry for change, Jojo has now expanded to 5 London boroughs, and the core values of Cook to Care remain hearty and strong, building a better future for young people and prison leavers. In today's episode, we'll learn about Jojo's community work, the importance of food, and how to cultivate space for soul and humanity for a collective of people. Thank you so much for joining us today, Jojo. It's so nice to have you on our show.
Hi, thank you for having me.
So we're so happy to have you. And also for people who may not know, tomorrow we're hosting a yoga session online. You can get tickets to the yoga session, and we're asking that everyone makes a small donation of choice to Cook to Care charity. So if you haven't already signed up, please do that and look at our events coming up. But Jojo, tell us a bit more about your background. I understand that you studied fashion design before beginning Cook to Care. So what spurred the change in studying fashion to starting Cook to Care charity?
So I did menswear design for 3 to 4 years after uni, and then all of my work was always purpose driven. So anything that I did, all the concepts, I guess the ethos of sustainability always kind of resonated with me through it, everything that I did do. And there's quite a toxic environment within across the fashion industry. There's not much change even now that I've left. So I realized that if I had these challenges and these obstacles within an industry, but I can't make those changes, what can I do to make those changes maybe outside the industry? So that was kind of the initial trajectory of I'm not happy with how this industry is delivering. I can't do anything whilst I'm working in it, because I guess you become the hamster on the wheel. So I knew that the only way, I had to basically take myself out of that environment, reevaluate what are the core things that I love, what are the things that I care about. One of them is mental health. One of them is sustaining communities. And those don't align with the way that I was working in the industry that I was working in at that time. I know that there's been various changes now. I've always been an advocate for positive mental health, an advocate for well-being change. So I just basically started volunteering. I was still kind of working freelance, and I was doing a lot of trauma-focused work, trauma-focused research, facilitating and creating creative writing workshops or design workshops as a way to encourage and empower positive mental well-being. And that led me onto a path of prison reform and led me to doing my own thing and kind of merging all those qualities into one. And now it's my own.
That's awesome. I think the key is just take all of your passions and seeing if you can actually just put it together and to be able to do that. It's fantastic. And what were the first steps of Cook to Care last year? Because obviously it was started during the pandemic. And were you thinking about it beforehand, and the pandemic really spurred you to start it right away? What were the first steps and thinking behind it?
So the first steps was I had already started working from home from February. I know and I knew that furlough was to come. I just had this gut feeling my job was going to go out the window. And then I knew that, there's this inherent socioeconomic issue going on. And as it was getting closer and closer to the point where I knew I was getting furloughed, I was like, what am I going to do? Because I'm not just going to sit and, take walks to the park and enjoy my time doing nothing. I was directly impacted, when I was younger through being homeless with my mom. I know that food like played like a vital part in, I guess, like serving as like an oasis. So although we were homeless, although we were living like catastrophic like environments, the one thing that we did have was food, and that was like the highlight of the day. So as everything, I guess, came to the surface and people were able to be honest about their living situations, which didn't happen because of COVID, right? So these were like pre-existing issues,
right?
But COVID shone light on making people feel comfortable to be honest, to be like, this is how we're living. This isn't okay. Because COVID actually caused those same issues to people that didn't ever think that they'd be in a position where they might need food, where they might go to the food bank. So I had a kitchen. I know that I can cook fairly well. So I was like, okay, the one thing that I can do, instead of just spending money or donating money somewhere, not really seeing how that impact is being used, or how that money is being used for impact, I'm going to put this much money of my own money, and these are how many meals that I'm going to cook per week, and it's going to be for vulnerable neighbours, and people local to the community. So that's where it started, basically. And in Lambeth, there wasn't a very good COVID response. So then services like mine, whether they were pre-established or established because of the lockdown, became in high demand. So from the end of March to the beginning of April, I'd say I'd already started calling it Cook to Care. I already realized this was going to be a long-term project. And I think we were delivering about 700 meals a week by that point, or 5 to 700. And then by the end of May was 1,000 for my home kitchen. And I'd lost my job in that time. I'd already invested 2 months of my time into the project. And then I just found ways, I was looking for ways of how can I sustain this? And then how can I bring all my other values and expertise into it to ensure that this actually becomes like a long-term service.
That's incredible. So 1,000 meals, May 2020. And yes. That's incredible. And so how many meals are you cooking now?
So at the moment, we are doing around 800. So people tend to be on a service anything from 3 to 6 months.
Okay.
So we're in a transition period where people, I guess, are getting back up on their feet, mm-hmm. or having the support of food has helped them in other ways, or given them the time to, take on part-time jobs that they didn't have the time to do, where, food, if you're a family of 6 and you have to cook for, 6 children, that can take up a majority of your day. But a service like ours can kind of give you that time to invest elsewhere, whether that be a job, whether that be, do your online training course that you've been waiting to do. So it's usually 3 to 6 months, and we're in the transition where a lot of people are relieving themselves from our service. So we stick to 1,000 meals. I try not to go above that, and I fill in the gaps when people relieve themselves from services, and then we then do another community outreach saying that we have space for X amount of families or X amount of individuals for the next 3 to 6 months, and that's how the system kind of operates at the moment.
Sure, that's fantastic. And one of the phrases, beggars can't be choosers, is one that you stand quite firmly against. Choice shouldn't be limited to the few, and those without it should not be forced to go hungry. And can you tell us a bit more about how this core belief originated for you?
I mean, for me, I don't know, I've always had this, I've always felt uncomfortable when people say it. I think it's almost, it's like a sentiment that's been instilled in us, right? That if people aren't better off, it must be because they've made bad choices on their lives. Yeah. So whatever we can provide to better their lives or for the betterment of that community should just be what they're happy with.
Yeah.
But then they can't make their own choices, mm-hmm. or their own decisions. And if you're already marginalized, you already don't have a path that provides you with options and choices, and you're already facing barriers and obstacles. So if the only option that we then give them to, help them is only one choice, then we're also not giving them then we're also not giving them a choice, right? And then what I've seen like over the years is that then that kind of like creates this 360. So there's also this issue that certain marginalized communities, it's inherited through generation to generation to generation, but that's because of the lack of choices that they've had and the lack of choices that they're given. So we can't expect them to break those cycles if we're not providing them that space to break them. So it's quite like, it's like that was probably a very long-winded way of explaining it, but it's pretty simple. If you don't give people, more than one choice, then we can't expect them overnight to make a huge change of, in their life, which is not being dependent on social housing or benefits, which are not benefits. It's very limited. I think 10 years ago, maybe 13 years ago now, there was like incredible deductions in benefits, and the people that it impacts most are the people that need it most. So I've just always known that whatever we do, whatever we deliver, whatever food that we're cooking, it's made with love. It becomes like a very personal experience, from the colors of the vegetables, through the textures, through the flavor, like all of that is considered when we're like creating menus, obviously with nutrition at heart. And that's the message to deliver. We do care, right? Instead of being like, oh, this is what we can do for you and deal with it. It's more like, we can. And then that further empowers them to then think, okay, so people do care. So maybe there is something positive. Maybe I can aspire. Maybe there is some sort of hope.
Yeah, and I imagine that also gives the space for people to really come forward and be honest with what their situations are.
And to be embarrassed. And I think that's the thing. Like a lot of people say it's what's the word? Not undermining, but there's a word that's always used, and it's like it's not embarrassing. It's embarrassing. The thing that is embarrassing is the fact that we live in a society that we do, and yet people are still hungry. There is still a lack of access to nutritional food that also tastes good at an affordable price. And we provide skills and development opportunities too, and we've had like 30% of our beneficiaries become volunteers. So then by giving them something, they've then wanted to give back to their own community, and then we then have provided them a space to upskill themselves to then realize, oh, like maybe I could work in operations, maybe I could work in the kitchen, maybe I could apply and, work for Deliveroo, maybe I can do, we provide a space where I guess they think maybe we can.
And I love how you spoke about sometimes there's this preconception that people who are currently hungry, it's poor decisions that they've made, and as you mentioned, it could be a whole flux of other factors that contributed to the situation that people are in, and it could be generational, it could be there's so many other things. Would you be able to give maybe some examples of maybe some of the lived experiences of those that you've worked with, and some that have benefited from the services that you provide? Like, how close are you to that process or to these people?
So, like, for us, relationship is really important. A lot of families, although they might be, although their foundation is strong in terms of their immediate family is like a family of 7, a lot of them don't have the foundations that we have here. So a lot of them are, trying to equip themselves, trying to navigate their world and their life in a very isolated way without the support system that most of us have. So for like Cook to Care especially, us just saying, hey, we can give you food and it's going to be delivered to your door this day isn't enough. It's about understanding their needs. Where else do they need support? And if we can't directly support that, do we have sources of contacts or other resources that can facilitate that? So it becomes a service with with different aspects to it. And whether whether it's a direct support or an indirect support, we ensure that they're navigated like through that process and through those systems, because a majority of them are either self-identifying like single parents, prison leavers, or their status is homeless. A lot of them are skilled. A lot of the, we might deem it as, oh, they don't, a lot of people don't have qualifications. A lot of them do, but they've just been stuck in a system for so long that those qualifications don't mean anything to those that should employ them, that don't employ them. And I think one of the biggest things, and I guess this is just a theory of mine, but England has got a huge like gig economy, right? So it's like job by job payment. And for people that are highly skilled, or for people that are highly skilled with the opportunities for experience, a job by job payment is good because you have flexibility of your schedule. Your rate can be charged, at an astonishing rate where you wouldn't, receive that salary within a job. But for those who aren't given the experiences they need for the skill sets that they have, end up in what we deem as menial jobs. And those jobs are underpaid, they're not reliable, they're short term, and it's impossible for them to survive on the money that they do. So a lot of the people that we provide for, they have benefits, but they are working 2 or 3 other jobs. It's just that the opportunities of the jobs are so small and so slim that they basically can't make ends meet.
It's incredible, like widely just maybe not talked about, or just misunderstood. And I think it's really important that we have these types of conversations to learn more about this cause and how we can all support and really make transformational change in the space, because it's definitely needed. One thing you also mentioned, which I liked, was ensuring that the food was healthy, and that one thing I also saw on your website is that it's flavorful and it's made with love, which is also very important. And I was just wondering, where does the inspiration for your dishes come from? I know you mentioned that you did like to cook, but does it come from your childhood, or where did you get the inspiration for these meals?
Yeah, I mean, it definitely comes from my childhood. My mum is Greek Cypriot and my dad is Iranian. So food has food has had a huge influence on me, and especially those cuisines. So I guess the foundations always come from the Mediterranean, or Persia, Iran. But I have to be conscious that if you're delivering 1,000 meals to 70 households, they have to be age appropriate. And that's from a toddler that's 1 year old to someone that is elderly that's 80. So the foundation. So I guess the nutritional elements of what we cook, and I guess the science behind what we cook, definitely comes from my Greek and Iranian heritage. But then what I create is something that can be child friendly. Some people love spicy food and some people don't. So it's about week on week we create a menu, and it's ensuring that in 1 month we know that everyone has had a dish that they love. No one, I don't think we deliver any food that anyone hates, but we ensure that there is that enjoyment. The stew is spicy, or making a pasta that's quite simple that we know that children are going to make, but ensuring that that isn't something that we do every week. And that also encourages communities and people and individuals to actually try foods that they may not have tried before, right? So, there's also this idea that, certain demographics of people only eat a certain type of food, but we're plant-based. We've never worked with meat or fish. Sometimes we do work with dairy, and that tends to be when we're making more pasta dishes and more the child-friendly menus. But I'd say 80% of our recipients throughout have always been meat eaters, yet they've actually been given food that they probably wouldn't have eaten before. It would be assumed that they would never try, even if you do give it to them. And actually, I think by delivering it with love and creating this experience where actually they enjoy the food, they are willing to try, they do try, and they enjoy it. And they're in some aspect that their diets change indirectly.
Right. And we obviously know that diet really impacts, everything else, your health and your outlook. So that's really great. Here at Kind Community, we're advocates for sustainable change, but we like to make the point that this extends beyond the environment. And I know you and I have had this conversation for quite a bit now. But people, their lives and their aspirations must also be sustainable and attainable. Do you see cooking as a collective of young people and prison leavers in the same way, helping to provide a real, accessible and genuinely sustainable future for all?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I wouldn't be using food as a source if I didn't believe in it. But it's not just like the meals that we make, right? So where we do provide skills and development opportunities, 30% of what we cook comes from the garden that we grow, and everyone is a process of that. So we get the seedlings, we grow the food, we nurture it. So the idea is that people that may have direct lived experience of neglect, or you've been in prison for 10 years of your life without the care and nurture that you need, it's a way of the food growing aspect teaches them those values, right? And even if it's not that, even if they've not received that care themselves, by them learning how to care for something else and actually realizing that there's a process that has a positive outcome and then has like a delivery with a result, which is the food on the table, teaches them to be able to teach that to, I guess, their families, their children, their friends. Because this is where it becomes generational, right? If you don't upskill just one person or provide a space where they can attain certain values, then they can only teach what they know, right? So it's not with intent. It's like I wouldn't be able to teach my friends to cook if I couldn't cook myself. So if none of us could cook, would we ever have dinner at each other's houses? No, so it's about providing that space, but with the idea that whatever we're teaching holds value outside of that space. So it's not just to cook here, it's to cook when you leave. It's to realize that that cooking isn't just the cooking aspect. There's operations, there's logistics, there's delivery, there's ideas that you have to nurture, there's growing that has to be nurtured. And all of these are skill sets that can be employable. And I think we lose touch of those things.
That's brilliant. Can you tell us a bit more about like the community garden? You mentioned, so you grow all your own produce. That's brilliant.
Yeah, it's not big enough for like 100% of our meals to be cooked with the produce, but we have like 6 growing boxes. It was like a disused garden. We revived it. And so we've got we've got various herbs, various spring onions, we've got beetroot, potatoes, 6 different lettuces, artichoke, Chinese mustard greens, Chinese greens, garlic. Yeah, so
that's fantastic.
All of our salads come from the garden, and most of the seasoning for the stews will come from the herbs in the garden. And we cook at mass, so it's I'd say it's at least like 20 kilos or so a week that we can harvest.
That's great.
Yeah, so the idea is that we find more disused spaces and revive them in the same way.
And this is all in South London?
Yeah, this is all in Lambeth. Our base is in Lambeth. We deliver outside of Lambeth, but our base and our growing is in Lambeth. And I worked with some like landscape architects who by day have like quite corporate jobs, but they all have like a social conscious. So we delivered this together. And then now the idea is to find more disused spaces, revive them into food growing, because it also cuts that issue of, there is supply to the demand, right? And there is demand for supply, but there's still a gap where people that need it most are not accessing it. But if there was more green areas and if people just knew that actually growing food does not take that much time at all, and you can make an abundance of organic fruit and veg at no cost, I guess, we would resolve an issue, which is huge. So
yeah. I guess we have touched on it throughout this conversation, but can you tell us a bit about some of the biggest challenges you faced throughout this process since starting Cook to Care in March, and how has it been managing a team of volunteers specifically? So obviously many NGOs, startups struggle with this. What would be your advice to them?
Okay. So I guess this is like for everyone. The biggest obstacle has been access to funding. So at the beginning, it was self-funded, and I guess that was for like the first 6 months. But I knew that that's what I wanted to invest into, what I was doing, whether I knew that this was going to be a long-term job for me or not. And it really wasn't a lot of money. It was just, the money that, the little money that someone might have in their savings that they would never touch was the little money that I decided to be like, well, this can't really do much for me now. You can't buy a house right now. I can't really do anything with this money unless I wait on it. But what I can do is have huge impact by using this. So the access to grants has not been easy. They're very time consuming. And if you're not applying to, a different funding application every few days, then you're not keeping your chances high of how much money that you can attain. So I have worked freelance before, and I guess this kind of encourages a gig economy, which I don't really agree with. But we started to really focus on how can we generate our own money and our own revenue that we can then reinvest back into the service. So we've done a lot of commissioned work at schools with different community centres. We've delivered a lot of like cook-along workshops, some for community-driven organisations and some for some corporate organisations. And as we've built that portfolio of work, we're now starting to get larger commissions, and but that also has been a challenge because those are other jobs that you have to manage whilst you still are operating Monday to Friday, an organization that consists of over 100 volunteers. So I guess access to funding has been the biggest obstacle, but we've been okay. And that's because we realized quickly that you can't be dependent on, government funding and local authority support, because it just isn't there.
Right.
And then in terms of managing the volunteers, we've been really lucky. I think that because Cook to Care is quite young, we've been able to adapt to change, right? So there are a lot of organizations that require volunteers, and they don't get the input for the output that they do to, try and employ volunteers. And I think that's because they've been established for so long that they have one way of working. So volunteers might have to be subject to committing to 40 hours a month, to certain days of the week. So it becomes a commitment that not many can do. But because we've bootstrapped this and we've been adaptable to change, I have ensured that we have worked around everyone else's schedule. So I've never dictated, this is how many hours, this is how many days. It's like, I know what the schedule is. I know what the delivery is. I know what the result has to be. And then I look to everyone else, see what their availability is. And then I guess it's like a bit like Tetris. And then I fit them in a way to ensure that the delivery week on week is what it is.
Yeah,
and obviously
no,
there are
absolutely.
obstacles because some people are furloughed and then they've gone back to jobs. Some people, have last minute, they need to isolate at home, and I've got a fixed schedule for that week. And it's the obstacle there is just that I've had to work more.
Yeah,
I've had
sure.
Or, I've had to say no to a job that would have generated us revenue. But, we can't, on the morning when people are expecting their weekly food to arrive, you're not in a position to sacrifice their meals just for a little bit of revenue, which hopefully will come more frequently now that we've built this portfolio's work. But back then it was like, oh my God, am I actually going to say no to this job now? And each time I did, but then I was vulnerable then, so I didn't know if those choices were the right choices. So it becomes quite isolating, actually. I think that's it. It's like, especially through lockdown, right? So you started something in your kitchen. It's kind of been, it's been on your own. You have a team of volunteers, which without them, you wouldn't have your service, but you manage them alone. So there isn't really anyone else that can really come in to take that burden, because it's like a year and a half's worth of work that's just like in my head.
Right.
I can't really articulate to someone else. So
no,
then
absolutely.
it's just quicker for you to make, to be the solution each time. But I know that that's not sustainable.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Maybe now then is a good time to let us know if people are interested. I mean, what you're doing is absolutely amazing, and I think you're making such a huge difference, and people would want to, volunteer with you and so how can people get involved with Cook to Care?
In terms of how do they
volunteer,
or what roles are there? Oh, so simply just email us. There isn't really a formal process at the moment. There will be a bit more of a formal process in terms of a bit more of a structured job description, but it's literally if you email hello@cooktocare.co.uk, there's another group of volunteers that manage that email chain, and they kind of like filter through the emails, and then I get the messages, and then I make the phone calls. And then that's because a lot of people say, oh, I want to do deliveries, but they don't realize that there's so many other aspects that they can be involved in that might interest them.
Right.
So we've got like various students that I know that they need work experience, but the work experience opportunities aren't there. So I'm like, okay, perhaps you didn't want to work for a food charity, but you have a degree in marketing and you want to get into marketing and no one's giving you work experience. Cook to Care needs marketing. Our social media platforms need TLC. So then I create like individual projects for them that will then further kind of support their CVs and support the experiences that they need to then go off and get the employment that they need. And I feel like that's the way that we give back, right? Because obviously volunteer work is unpaid work. So people come in knowing that they're not going to get paid. But then I find that it kind of undermines actually what goes into volunteering. It's a job. You
Absolutely.
are doing a full-on job. It is tiring. It is exhausting. If you were to be paid for a job that, that they do for Cook to Care, they should be on a substantial salary. So I guess our way of giving back is what can we create for you that can further.
You're enjoying, but also believe in your mission as well, I'm sure.
Exactly.
So hopefully that you get an influx of emails after this conversation.
Yeah, hopefully.
Well, thanks so much. Finally, some much shorter, but no less difficult questions for a quick fire round. Yes. How do you define sustainability?
Oh my God. For me, when I think about sustainability initially, the first thing I think is society. I think a lot of people think that sustainability, and I know that we've had these conversations before, is about improving, the polluted air that we have, which is a huge problem, But just as an example, but as little fish, there isn't that much we can do. Yes, we can change our cars. Yes, we can reduce how much transport that we take, but that is such a big issue. That is such a vast problem that even with those changes, the problem will exist. So for me, it's about the layers beneath it. Like, who is actually impacted most by that pollution? Because we care about it, but perhaps we probably probably live in homes that aren't even that polluted, but actually people in social housing are on those main roads. They're the ones that are impacted by the larger non-sustainable issues that we face. So how do we support them, and how do we further empower those communities, and so that they can sustain themselves? And then we can look at the bigger picture, right?
Right.
Because the bigger picture requires a lot of money, a lot of manpower.
Transformational.
Yeah, it's transformational, but the other issues that need sustaining, as long as individuals we're all helping one other person, then it's like power in numbers. So it's
exactly.
like, yeah, everyone doing a little bit can do a lot.
Sure.
Basically. Yeah.
No, agreed fully. What are you most hopeful for?
Right. What am I most hopeful for? I feel like I've been such a pessimist recently. I think it's quite corny, but I think there's a lot of this idea that we should be educating the marginalized groups about how to upskill themselves, which but we don't actually educate ourselves in why they're in the situations that they're in. And so like teaching them how to do a CV, yeah, like that's great. But if big corporate firms are still not employing them, what use is it for them to know how to present themselves in an interview if they're not getting interviews? So I think I'm hopeful for the education kind of reversing and it actually looking to us rather than to them, and then the burden again being on them.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I love that. Yeah, how can we upskill ourselves?
How that happened. And I don't know, you know. So
a lot of mindset.
I think COVID has triggered it a little bit, but I'm also aware that our lives are getting back to normal, and I already see that, you know, people are forgetting that COVID isn't over. You know, the issues that were there during lockdown will not be over after the July the 2019 for those that are still suffering. It might be for us because we can go about our lives and do what we want, but those issues remain. So I think we need to be conscious of that. And I'm hoping that we can be.
Yeah, not be gaslit into going back to normal or whatever that normal is.
Yeah.
And okay, 2 more quick fire round questions. So who inspires you?
I'd say the beneficiaries and my volunteers, like 1,000%, because I don't even know if I can articulate it into words, but I think it's given me hope that there will be like some shift and a societal change. Like, you know, our volunteers come from so many different backgrounds. It is, you know, from our beneficiaries that become volunteers to people that are, you know, work for human rights, to people that have never volunteered in their life and never thought that they would. We've all like shared our stories, and perhaps like, you know, unlike-minded people have all been sharing a space, and there's been some solace in having this drive and passion in making change, and they've sustained me and like my well-being. And I don't know, Cook to Care's volunteers and recipients. That's it. Fantastic. I could go on, so I'm going to stop.
It's okay. And where will Cook to Care be in 10 years' time?
Gosh. I would hope that in 10 years, if we are still around, which I'm aiming towards, you know, there won't just be volunteers. I would hope that we have a team of people, that we are generating our own revenue, that we have employed the people that have been our recipients. I don't want this to be, hey, we've helped you for so long, that's it. And I see it so much in NGOs. It's like you get these people to a certain point where they feel empowered, but also you still hold the values where you wouldn't employ them or you wouldn't give them. So they're going, so yeah, I'd hope that in 10 years we've established ourselves enough to have a team of people working for us full time, to hopefully have revived a lot of green spaces across London. That would be, yeah, that would be it.
That's brilliant. I can't wait to see what
Yeah,
the future holds. I'm sure it'll be amazing.
I set myself like a huge goal.
Some great goals. But honestly, Jojo, I feel like we could continue this conversation on for hours.
Yeah, me too. I feel like I haven't touched on all of it, but I'd be open to like speaking again, or if anyone did have questions like after viewing it, I'd be happy to like, you know, send some answers so that you can like post them on social media if you need to.
Fantastic. So everybody who's listening, if you do have any further questions for Jojo or about Cook to Care, do please reach out to her. Her handle's below here. And also, luckily, Jojo has agreed to join our panel discussion on the 21st, where we'll be talking about sustainable development, attainability versus accessibility in the sustainability space. We'll be talking everything from eco-ableism to ensuring that we are building a future that is inclusive and accessible to all. So we're very much looking forward to hosting that panel and having you on it, Jojo. And that again is on the 21st. If you want to get tickets for anyone listening, you can get that on our website on the community page. But thank you so much, Jojo, for speaking to us.
You.
I look forward to meeting you finally in person in the next couple of weeks.
Yeah.
So thank you so much.
Thank you, guys. I really appreciate it. You too.
If you enjoyed my conversation with Jojo today, please do share, like, and subscribe for more conversations. We go live every Friday and very much look forward to having you join us next week. Have a great weekend, everyone.